Welcome, everyone. It's so great to see so many people in this Zoom room. We're going to go ahead and get started and talk to you all about semester in San Francisco, which is why you're here. My name is Christine Sweeney. I'm an associate director in the academic affairs office of the Wharton MBA program. And so in that capacity, I serve as an academic advisor for 3 cohorts of our 12 cohorts here at Wharton. And the other thing that I spend my time on is this program. So semester in San Francisco, which I've worked on for the last about 5 or 6 cycles worth of students that I've seen through this program. And I will allow my colleague Christiana to also introduce herself.
Thanks, Christine. So my name is Christiana Wu, and I am director for the Semester in San Francisco program, specifically for career services. So I partner very closely with Christine. She handles the academic side, and I handle the career side. I am based here in San Francisco. That's not a real view back there. I am actually working from home, and that would be multi-million-dollar view, so that doesn't exist. But I will say, if anybody has ever been to our Wharton San Francisco campus, you do directly overlook the bridge, but not that bridge, the other one, the Bay Bridge, if anyone's familiar with San Francisco. And so we have a pretty stellar view. We are located right off the Embarcadero. So, if any prospects out there are interested, we will organize tours for you guys. So we welcome you. But anyway, so I oversee career services and I'm based here in San Francisco, and I'm really excited to be here. By the way, just some housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box at any time during the presentation, and we will, if it makes sense, we'll pause and answer them then or at the end of the presentation. Okay, back to you, Christine.
Yeah. Great. So this is the view that Christiana was talking about. These are the front steps of campus. And what you've seen pop up on the screen is what we used to call like the 5 pillars of San Francisco. Just to give you a really brief history lesson, the program was launched as a pilot in the fall of 2012 out of what used to be the Wharton Innovation Group. So Professor Carl Ulrich was his brainchild. He was essentially the founder of SSF. And the goal was to build a really immersive learning experience for students who were interested in areas like technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. That's by no means just an exhaustive list, but that was the original idea. After a couple of years, it went from being a pilot program to an official part of the Wharton MBA program. And so that idea that it's this immersion and these pillars have remained over time, and we try to improve and change as we see changes from students' interest levels and their desires and where different industries are headed. And so we do everything in mind with this cohort. So we customize the curriculum to what the students want to learn. We do outreach to different companies based on the interest of the students who are in the program. And then the student community is incredibly tight-knit. Partly that's because they're taking all of their classes together in a way that they haven't had at Wharton. But also that's because they are the community with each other in San Francisco. You may have friends out there, but there's nothing like that Wharton community when you're there. And it's a much smaller, more intimate kind of experience than when you're in Philadelphia. There's already questions about visiting campus. There's not a sign-up link for visiting campus, but Christiana, do they reach out to the front desk if they want to come see campus? What's the process?
Yeah, I was actually just going to type an answer to Diva Karuni's question, but I'm thinking as we're talking this out right now, because we did have scheduled tours scheduled back in the spring. I think that maybe it makes sense to schedule a few more in the fall when activity starts picking back up and the SSF cohort is on campus. You might find that a little bit more, interesting. And then we can schedule some more tours and then during the fall and let you all know. That might be the best way to do it. I can work with Karina in admissions and we can figure out that process. Yeah, that might be the best way to do it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
And it's Diva, just so it's easier.
Oh, okay. I like
Thank
that name, Diva. It's like you
Thank
can
you.
actually call yourself, you're like, yeah, I'm a diva.
And there's a few more questions I see about like the size of the cohort, the timeline of when you go. And so I think this is a great time to talk about that. And I'll highlight a class profile from fall 2019. So we'll soon be able to update officially the fall 2022 class profile. This slide will become the fall 2022 class profile. But fall 2019 was the last time we had a more normal-ish semester in San Francisco program. So I think the stats remain similar. We take up to 75 students in the cohort. This year, we're sending about 70 students, and the gender breakdown is about equal, and it's really widely international cohort. So there's always 12 to 20 different countries represented amongst the student body. The top industry preferences, Christiana will go into more detail about this. They tend to be things like technology and VC, but technology housed within that, I think, is like the more big tech firms, and then, the smaller startups, et cetera. These are just some photos of cohorts from over the years. So we send this cohort of about 70 students in the fall of their second year. There's no option to do San Francisco in your first semester. And the reason is that Wharton has a highly structured first year academic program called, we have our core curriculum. And in the first semester, students take their fixed core classes with each other. And so that's a really important time to get to Wharton, to form bonds with your classmates in your cohort, to lay the foundation academically that you're going to build upon with your other classes. And so for that reason and a few others, we don't have a first semester option. We did pilot a spring semester, and without going into too many details, I think it's something that you'd understand once you're at Wharton. It didn't work out that well. It was more of a niche program that only fit a few students' goals. The fall of second year is actually an ideal time for students to go from an academic perspective, and also I think from a career perspective. The application timeline starts in first year. So towards the end of first semester is when we open the applications, and then the admissions happen in the spring of first year. Karan asked how the class profile is decided and if there's any upper cap on the number of students. So the upper cap is 75, and that's partially a space reason. We can't fit more than 75 students in the usual classroom. It's also not ideal to go much higher than that from like a learning perspective in the classroom. And truly, to be honest, we find that that's kind of accommodating most students who want to go. The admissions process looks at not too many like specific characteristics other than, there's an essay portion and we read these essays and are evaluating, the candidates based on their essay responses, but also GPA. So academics are quite important in the admissions process for SSF. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the academic side of the program. So this is just a curricular snapshot of a few classes that we've offered year over year. These are some of our most popular and highly sought after classes, not just popular with students who are interested in going to SF, but also just students at Wharton. So students in Philadelphia, they want to take these classes. And these classes are offered in Philadelphia, but there's a high level of competition to get into them. And when you go to San Francisco, you just get to take, any of the courses that are offered out there. Essentially, we'll call it for free. And this curriculum is reviewed and updated every single year. So like I said, these ones on the slide have been offered year over year. We do vary with a few of the things. It looks slightly different every year. We might swap out one elective for another. Partially that's based on what the students want to see. We send out a survey of students who attend our info sessions and express interest in San Francisco, and then we use that data to put together the curriculum. And so, you'll see one of these classes, influence, is literally about learning how to get people on your side, to use tools to influence others to kind of go your way. And it explores things like power and status. and also networks from informal to formal. Scaling operations is a course that is about how to take your business and then how you make those strategic decisions for how to scale successfully, and also looking at the challenges that a lot of firms experience while they're scaling. The venture capital class is actually called Venture Capital and the Finance of Innovation. And so, this is definitely a popular class for finance majors, but also just anyone who's interested in the space of venture capital. And then negotiations, finally, is one that is universally popular. It's just what it sounds like. It's going to teach you about the art and science of negotiation. There's a few more questions. Avantika asked if people could still go spring of first year or spring second year. No, it's just fall. And then I'm going to jump over it just to get to some of the academic questions right now. There are a few questions about dual degree programs. So a question about if it is congruent with the joint JD MBA program and also with the MBA /MA Lauder joint degree. So yes, you can be a Lauder student and go to SSF. I believe you can also be a JD MBA and go to SSF. It just depends on which classes you need to take in that semester when you're going to be away from campus, because it's just Wharton courses that are offered in SSF.
Christine, it looks like there's a question from Vibu about, are the classes offered fixed? Are they taught by professors in person or online?
That's a great question. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by fixed. I mean, we determine a list of classes. The professors are coming out to San Francisco. So they're once in a while teaching a virtual session, but by and large, they are flying back and forth and teaching on the West Coast and then going back to the East Coast where they're based. So the list of courses that we offer in San Francisco is the subset of courses that students in San Francisco can take. And there are a few online courses now at Wharton. And so technically a student might be able to take advantage of an online course. But usually the students don't tend to do that, especially if it conflicts with their SSF classes. That time difference kind of can mess with you a little bit. The one class that is required for all students in San Francisco is called the Regional Seminar class. And so this is essentially a speaker series. The teaching faculty member, which has been Professor Ulrich, who founded the program for the past few years, he'll bring in guests each week from various different industries. This is like his personal Rolodex usually. He's so well connected out there. And so it's really unique in that like this small cohort that goes to San Francisco has direct in-person access with these guests, which would not be possible in Philadelphia. They maybe Zoom in, which would be also great, but nothing like meeting them in person or having the chance to maybe continue that to foster that connection. And the other thing I love to point out here is that you'll notice a lot of these names have a little WG or a C after them or an ENG. These are a lot of Penn and Wharton graduates. So that's another fantastic thing. It's you can really see yourself in the shoes of these people, thinking about like what you would like your career to be somewhere down the line. All right, so I've seen some questions coming in about extracurriculars, which is great because we're going to start talking about that now. So student life is a big part of Wharton, and that is not different in San Francisco. I think what is different is the types of activities and like the intimacy that you have out there. So Ayushi asked how SSF affects a student's involvement in on-campus extracurricular activities. So obviously, if it's on campus in Philadelphia and you're in San Francisco, you're going to miss some things. That being said, students hold tons of events out on the West Coast. In some cases, students will visit their friends in Philadelphia at some point, so they might come back and participate in some activities. They may still be involved with the clubs that they're holding leadership positions in, so they're going to be doing a lot of like distance work with their clubs, and then they'll have their friends come out to the West Coast. But the other thing they'll do is have a lot of fun out on the West Coast, planning activities like going to Yosemite, going to Lake Tahoe. They usually do an end of semester trip to Hawaii as a cohort. And then they do a lot of, they'll do some career treks. They'll also do just small group events and small club events. So wine club, if you're a wine club officer, you've got a lot of opportunity out there to plan some fantastic activities for the rest of the cohort. Same thing with the tech club and entrepreneurship club. You know, you're almost in the best, I mean, you kind of are in the best place to take advantage of that when you're out there. I'll let Christiana address like the recruiting stuff because she does touch on that later. But essentially, there's lots to do in San Francisco. The other thing I'll say is like Philly is a little bit, life can be flaky in Philly because there are so many events that you could be at the same event as your friend and you never cross paths with them because you came at the top of the event and you had 5 other things to go to and then they came towards the end of it and you never saw each other. In San Francisco, because it is a smaller cohort, when people plan things, like they really go to it. And those deep connections are more easily formed than when you're in Philly and you're pulled every different direction or pulled to New York on the weekends, et cetera. So I think that one of the really nice things in San Francisco is it becomes really tight knit. It's like a family. And then there are a number of co-curricular activities that the students participate in. One that I'll highlight is the TechCrunch Disrupt conference. Our students usually take advantage of the student price tickets and they will go enjoy the conference together. And then finally, I'll just briefly touch on this because I do think Christiana also touches on that. If you are an entrepreneur, there are resources here in Philadelphia to support you in your business journey. The Penn Wharton Entrepreneurship Office. There is an extension of Penn Wharton Entrepreneurship on the West Coast. And so they have a number of different programs that are really advantageous for those of you who have founded your own company. All right, Christiana. I'm going to take one question from Ayushi before I turn it over to you with the career side of things, and also with Vibu. So we've got a question about where students live when they go to SSF and mentions that short-term housing in the city can be tough to find. That is true. Students tend to live all over the peninsula, I would say, and even like outside of San Francisco, there are students who end up living in Oakland or in South Bay or other places in the East Bay. I'm not going to sugarcoat that it can be challenging, but I will say that the students do manage to find a place to stay for their 4 or 5 months out there. Some students are doing an internship in SF in the summer, so they might like get a place from summer through end of year, and that sometimes helps. And then students will tend to live together, so they might find a few roommates amongst their cohort mates. And then Ayushi asked if there were challenges that international students face moving to San Francisco during their MBA course. I don't think that well, I won't say that. I don't know of specific challenges for international students moving to San Francisco that domestic students don't experience. You don't have to change your I-20 since you'll just be there for a semester. So from a paperwork perspective, it's not an issue. And from a internship perspective, you will be able to get what we call curricular practical training, which is like what you need to do to get work authorization. We also support that for our students who are in San Francisco for the semester. So I think doing an extra course like for your work authorization is one of the little things that you have to do that domestic students wouldn't have to do. But other than that, I don't think moving to SF is more challenging than moving to Philadelphia for the start of your program from an international versus domestic perspective. And then Karan asked, if they were selected to SF, could they take their partner / family to SF for the duration of the program? Sure. If you want to bring your family, sure. No reason why you couldn't.
Okay, so I will go ahead and talk a little bit about career management. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Christine. So this slide basically showcases some data that we have over the last 3 years of placement data, placement in terms of internships and also full-time. And basically what I want you to take away from this slide is that we're seeing technology as a large sector, and that includes both the big techs as well as startups. We're seeing that increase over the last, it's even more than 3 years, but this is just, to kind of keep it simple, 3 years of data, that it's just been increasing over that time. And so that means as more of our students are going into tech as internships, or they're going into tech after graduating from MBA. And then in addition, we're also seeing an increasing number of our graduates move to the Bay Area post-graduation. And so, I don't know if this is new news for you. I think a lot of folks know that the Bay Area, tech, startups, the whole scene here is flourishing. I think what might be surprising is that Wharton, as a school, I think that, Wharton, just to see that technology, maybe like 10 years ago, or even like 8 years ago, folks may not have thought, well, Wharton is a tech school. Well, it's, we're kind of more quite general. We cover a lot of different areas, consulting, finance included. But I think what you're seeing here, and this is very telling, is that technology is now on par with consulting as far as placement. And then again, we see those trends even more pronounced among our SSF cohort. So what this just, leads me to, what I'm really trying to get at here is that, if you're interested in tech, startup, working in the Bay Area, I feel like Wharton is definitely on trend with that. At the same time, though, and this is something I also want to get across and also want to address Stephanie's question about whether, people who go into SSF, do they typically take internships in SF? And the answer to that question is no. So what we're also seeing, and I don't actually have a slide to display this data, but if we look at like the top 4 industries that our graduates go into from SSF specifically, like after they graduate, it is tech number 1, then it's consulting, then it's VC, and then it's banking, traditional banking. And from an area geography perspective, it's all over. So my point here as well, let me just emphasize, is that if you're interested in SSF, we see lots of students coming from different backgrounds. So for example, like if somebody is coming in with a pre-MBA sponsoring company and they're going to go back to their, sponsoring consulting firm. A lot of folks do SSF because they know, well, if I'm going back to my pre-MBA employer, this is a chance for me to explore something different. Like I know I won't be going into tech or living in the Bay Area post-MBA, but I want to give it a chance because who knows, 2 years after graduating, I very likely will want to make a change. So that applies. So what we do see is a good chunk of our SSF cohort year over year come from traditional backgrounds, consulting, banking for one, among like, a wide kind of geographical range, but they use SSF as a way to test out the industries out here, the space, all of that. So that's kind of I guess not really short answer. That's a long answer to your question, Stephanie. And then I know that I want to make sure that I'm getting to, I know there's some questions about fall recruiting, and you know what, I'll get to that in just a sec. Let me go through some of my slides. Next slide, please, Christine. This basically just showcases that Wharton alumni here in the Bay Area is just going up. The numbers are increasing. And actually, this is already outdated. I did this I think it was late last year. The San Francisco alumni numbers have superseded Philadelphia's. So we are now at New York City, San Francisco, and I guess Philly is now number 3. Sorry, Philly. But Philly will still always be near and dear to our hearts. But in any case, so yeah, that's where SF lands as far as alumni numbers. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do career service wise for our semester in San Francisco students. You get access to all of the things that you would have as if you were based in Philly, but some additional things that are available to you. We try to, as Christine might have mentioned, the coursework is very geared towards innovation and tech and VC entrepreneurship, those industries that are like largely represented out here. And what we try to do is create some networking opportunities. I think that was an answer to one of the questions in the chat box about like what are the networking opportunities. So we try to create those, and a lot of times they're housed on campus. And so what does that look like? It could be in the form of a power dinner. Power dinners are the name that we give this. It's a program where we invite really senior level executives from nearby companies come and speak to the students in a small intimate group setting over a dinner. So it's one of those opportunities where you're not, again, I want to emphasize intimate, maybe about 10 students, a maximum that we cap it at, because we want it to be a conversation and a very comfortable setting that you can ask your questions. I'll give you an example. The last one that we did pre-COVID, because that's when we were doing in-person dinners, we had the managing partner for Samsung Ventures, so their CVC arm, come and speak. And it was one of those like really organic conversations that turned into a natural, just really, really good conversation, but then turned into an invite to Samsung Ventures like annual conference. And so basically anyone who's interested in startup and VC would have loved to have been at that event, because it was just one big conference space hall full of like VCers and startup founders. So really interesting. So it's those kinds of, so while we try to create these structured networking opportunities, you'll find that some of it's also kind of like through your own network, or they're organically come about from these other sort of events. Other networking opportunities that we do, like Alumni Career Consultant for the Day, that's more targeted for early to mid-stage Wharton alum, and we bring those early to mid-stage Wharton alum. That's actually an online program, as it used to be in person, but the logistics didn't make sense. And that is very much, we structure one-on-one appointments with students and with alum, and then you can have kind of a nice sort of one-on-one informational. And then we do things like Scale School. So Scale School is run by Penn Wharton Entrepreneurship, which Christine just talked about in the previous slide. And that is, as the title refers, it is a workshop geared for entrepreneurs or startup employees who are looking to scale their businesses. And so, for example, one topic was using AI to scale your retail e-commerce business. And so those Scale School events are pretty big events in the sense that we bring out a Wharton professor to run the workshop. It's usually several hours long, and then there's alumni, again, usually mid to senior level alumni who are invited to speak. And then there's usually like a nice sort of like networking event, happy hour before and after. So again, these are just some examples. One of the things I do want to highlight that I think as Malcolm had a question about is fall recruiting. So it really depends, and that's a great question, because it really depends on what path that you're looking at. You're right, in your second year, because the SSF program is only available for your second year fall is the time when there's on-campus recruiting, but on-campus recruiting is only prevalent for certain industries. So you might see consulting would do on-campus recruiting, but tech, not necessarily. If you're looking at, let's say, investment banking, no, there really isn't on-campus recruiting in the fall of your second year. You're going to find that it's heavily based on internship hiring conversion. So you can see it's highly dependent on your target industry. Having said that, though, consulting being representing a big chunk of where our students go to post MBA. If you are interested in consulting full-time recruiting in the fall of your second year, all the big players Pretty much, yeah, all of them. The MBBs, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and the other large consulting firms do virtual interviewing, because again, one of the things we try to do is make all of our employers aware that we have 70 students in SSF at this time. So our employers understand that we have 70 students out here, and so accommodate them for virtual interviewing. But again, I would say that, in your case, Malcolm, if you end up joining Wharton and you're interested in SSF, it's like, talk to your academic advisor early and your career person early to determine, does SSF make sense? Because it may not, but I think for most of our folks, even those who are interested in on-campus recruiting, it can make sense. Still dependent though. Okay, one of the things I wanted to point out here that's very important is the yellow box here, which is in-semester internships. So just like the name implies, you can do an internship while you're in the program. It is considered a part-time because you are taking classes. So it's anywhere between 10 and 20 hours a week. They are almost always paid. And it's usually with startups, maybe a few VCs sprinkled in for good measure, but mostly startups. Very seldom do we see in-semester internships with like the FANGs, for example. But it's a great way to build extra experience. So maybe for those of you who I'm going to go back to that example. Let's say over the summer, you're like, I want to, play it safe. I want to work in like big tech or work in consulting or banking for the summer. So I kind of hedge my bets on that. But then I want to dabble in or try something completely risky, like working at a Series A company, digital health or something like that. And maybe you just don't have experience in the space and you want to kind of spread your wings and try something, very different, not necessarily, wanting to do it immediately after MBA, but maybe you want to do it maybe 5 years down the road. You want to see what it's like to work in an early stage startup. Then an in-semester internship could be a great way to achieve that. I will say one of the perks about an in-semester internship for our international students is that, like Christine said, there is a CPT course option available. So again, for our international students, you do have an option to work during that fall of your second year via that CPT course that you can sign up for. Okay, so that is like a kind of a special perk for SSFers. All right, I'm going to just pause here because I feel like there's lots of questions, and if I'm missing any, please, Christine or Karina can stop me and tell me I'm missing something. But I'm just going to try and go through this here. Let's see, I address that. Okay, what do companies during this semester? Yeah, I think Alessandro, the networking opportunities are, like I said, through these ways. We again try to have, one of the things that may not have been mentioned is that required course that you will need to participate in, called the Regional Seminar Series, is essentially, the professor brings in, Carl Ulrich is the professor, and he brings in speakers who are, working at these companies, usually mid to high level, and comes and, you're in a group of 70 meeting these folks. That's like a classic kind of company networking opportunity as well. Okay. Semester internships common amongst the cohort, 20 to 30%. Yeah, cohort participation. So it isn't the majority, and the main reason for that is because it's still 10 to 20 hours a week. And if you're taking a full load, let's say 4 credits, 5 credits, it's still, it's not like you have tons of extra time for socialization or for exploring SF. So people, coming into the cohort or into the program need to be choosy about what they decide to do with their time. Because for some folks, I would say maybe that 70 to 80% that decide not to, I think a lot of them might be thinking about, well, they have friends in the area, maybe they have family that they want to spend time with, or they just want to enjoy the Bay Area, which is, perfectly fine reason too. For some of them may want to recruit because, again, you're in second year, you're gearing up for your post MBA recruiting. Maybe some of you will already have offers and you're kind of like, maybe I'll just take it, or you want to keep recruiting, whether it's on campus or you want to recruit off campus. But either way, that fall could be used as an opportunity to sort of build that, build a foundation. And so, there's lots of reasons. I'd say that choosing to do an in-semester internship is a very personal one. And that's where I come in, where, if, you do join Wharton, and then the fall of your first year, we're going to be giving more of these presentations with alumni panels. So you'll get to hear from folks who participate in SSF directly. And then this is, I would say at that time is when you want to engage with either myself or with your academic advisor to really discuss if semester in San Francisco makes sense and if in-semester internships make sense too. Okay. Kind of technology typically recruit into roles, functions. Yeah, I mean, I would say typical roles or functions are very similar to the larger cohort that goes into tech. So for example, product management, biz ops and strategy, there's corp dev, there's, PMM, product marketing, there, the typical sort of business line roles that you would see. I feel like I'm missing some more out there that's just like really popular, but yeah, I would say those are the sort of the typical ones. Is there any question in the number of students who secure tech interest and the ones who opt for SSF? Well, I mean, I guess like, I don't know if there's necessarily a correlation. I don't know if, but like in the previous slide that I showed, we do see a larger number of our tech. I don't know if like, is it a, I guess correlation, but not necessarily causation, right? So we do see a larger number of our SSFers do pursue roles in tech. So yes, it is compared to the larger MBA community. Yes, we do see more of our SSFers go into tech roles, but that's probably self-selection, not necessarily like, I think maybe the question you might be asking Ayushi, or maybe it's, maybe a kind of maybe back of your mind question is like, does SSF give you an advantage if you're looking at pursuing tech roles? I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case. We have plenty of folks who stay in Philly and do the big tech recruiting or startup recruiting from Philly and are very successful. So no, I wouldn't say SSF gives you an added advantage in the eyes of the employer, but it can give you an advantage as far as just being geographically here, right? Like if you think about the networking and something that you will learn as you start to pursue, as you start to dive into these specific career paths and learn more about how they recruit, you will find out that startup recruiting is very networking based. So there's something to be said if you're networking from Philly versus you're networking from here, right? Like you could argue it could be easier. Although now with like, we're still kind of in this hybrid working model that, maybe it's not as like, people are very comfortable networking virtually or via like Zoom. But, things are opening up. And so, if it helps you to be on the ground here, networking with companies, or maybe dropping by and having a coffee with a company that happens to be like, situated like a few blocks from the campus, then there is something to be said about that. Right. So let me see. What can you look into? I guess, let's see. Oh, okay. Christine, you already got that. Good. Okay. They're open to okay. Is that interesting in regards to recruiting during the fall semester? Oh, okay. So I have a question about PE. So private equity. Any precedent of SSF students who pursue private equity? How is that industry in regards to recruiting during the fall semester? Yeah. So private equity is like, we do see some of our, and I have some graphs somewhere. It's not on this deck though, unfortunately, but it's I think of that. I mentioned the ranking of where our SSFs go to post MBA, tech being number 1, consulting number 2, VC number 3, IB number 4. I think PE might be either 5 or 6. So it isn't a, it's definitely a minority, but then again, we don't see a ton of students go into like PE as well. I mean, yeah, PE is popular, but it doesn't supersede some of these other big, industries that I just mentioned. But in any case, we do see SSFers go into PE. I think that it's fair to say that PE is a very networking based field. And so with that, I mean, here's the thing about, and maybe this has to be a question that, could be discussed offline or even but not to go into too much detail, but I think that you will see a lot of PE recruiting happen in your first year as opposed to your second year. So, as far as the fall semester recruiting goes, I don't know if that's going to actually, being in SF is not going to impact you as much. If you're interested in PE, you want to go hard at it in your first year and not wait until your second year to do it. Yeah, there's just certain industries that you will see. It's not just at Wharton, it's across all business schools that just heavily recruit in the first year. So think about that as you're planning which MBA program to join, or thinking about your timeline. If I'm going to start an MBA program in 2023, and you're thinking consulting, banking, PE, you want to really hit that in your first year. Whereas tech, hybrid. There are some companies you want to hit up hard in your first year in order to secure an internship, but then there are some that, you could wait to your second year. VC, startup, a lot of those you can kind of wait to your second year to really recruit heavy for. But there's a lot of caveats here and nuances. So, I definitely would say that, once you decide or you're getting closer to a short list of business schools, have those deeper conversations because it could be very case dependent. Okay. Compared to semester internships in Philly. To be honest, Vibu, I'm not sure what the in-semester breakdown looks like in Philly. I would argue it is less than that, though. I don't know if Christine has any insight into that, but I think, I will tell you this. The reason why we have a 20 to 30%, which is kind of large, for in-semester internships here in SSF, is because the scheduling is different also from Philly. The scheduling here in SF is a little bit more flexible. It's organized differently, the classes, than in Philly. And I think it gives you a little bit more blocks of time you could argue more blocks of time to be able to do an in-semester internship. I'd say also because we have that perk of having international work authorization support for SSF, maybe you can also argue that number definitely is higher than in Philly. Okay, yeah, I think I addressed all the questions unless I'm missing something, but let's go on to the next slide, please. And then, oh yeah, these are just some past events. I just wanted to showcase what it means when we talk about alumni networking events. Yeah, and one of the things I want to highlight is that our campus doesn't just doesn't just have our SSFers. We have our WEMBA classes too. WEMBA is, an acronym for Weekend Executive MBA. So these are working professionals who are getting their MBA simultaneously. And we have in the WEMBA classes, the first year and second year, each one is a little over 100. So a little over 200 total WEMBAs that come to the SF campus every alternating week. And because we have these working professional, mid to senior level executive MBAs, we want to capture those networking opportunities too. So we'll do something like a reciprocity circle, something that Adam Grant, I think he coined the term, which is essentially a structured networking event. Yeah. Okay. And then we still do virtual events as well. I think that it always lends itself well because, Philly will be doing events and we try to make sure when, if at all possible, that they're made virtually so that our SSF students can participate in that as well. Okay. And then next slide, I think we might be on to the last one. Oh, testimonials. Yeah. It's just interesting. I think that what you will hear, if you do end up joining Wharton, and you will see a very similar presentation as we gear up for the application process that kicks off in December of your first year. We'll be doing more presentations like this, and we'll have alumni panels. And so these are just some of the tidbits that we got from them. And I think what you'll just keep hearing is this community, and making some of their, finding their best friends in the program. That's what you just kind of hear year over year because of that smaller group kind of structure. And then, being able to take elective courses with professors and having, again, that sort of intimate small group setting, I think really sort of is a perk or an advantage of the program. Next slide, please. No, that's it. All right. Any questions for us? Please
I saw a few questions that I wanted to get to that related to one, healthcare management program. I think Nithya asked that. Yes, you can be a healthcare management student and go to SSF. In fact, we usually have a few healthcare management cohorted students who are participating in the program. It works out really pretty easily. And then a few students were asking about financing it, if there are any other associated costs and what's covered by the school. So there is a program fee associated with SSF. It's traditionally been $5,000 a student. I know that's an expensive, maybe not expensive in comparison to your entire tuition, but definitely another expense on top of everything else associated with the cost of business school. Students have been able to finance that with increasing their loans, but also there's something called the Wharton Student Experience Fund, which is a need-based fund, and it usually awards $5,000 per student. And so if you get into San Francisco, you can offset the entire amount of the program fee with that experiences fund. The other thing that, I think we also consider is in taking out additional loans to cover the cost of living out there. It is increased due to the fact that San Francisco is just a more expensive city than Philadelphia. I mean, I go and I get a breakfast sandwich and a coffee and I'm like astounded. It's like twice the price of what it is here. And then Avantika asked about why there were fewer than 75 students in 2019 and this year. And is that because less people opted in than got accepted? Does everyone who wants to go generally get in? So this is kind of a complicated answer. It has to do with a little bit of how admissions work. I've never worked full-time in admissions, and I don't know that I could. I think I'm in marvel at how they do it. But what happens is we get more applications than we have spots for. So we definitely have more interest in the program than we have students who go. But what will happen over time is if students aren't accepted, we run 2 rounds of admission. So there are 2 opportunities for students to either apply and then reapply if they don't get in, or if they decide later, they have a second chance to apply. But essentially what happens in that time is students might commit to a different decision that then doesn't include San Francisco. But I will say the majority of students who are committed to going will be able to go. We do have students who we just don't admit because for one reason or the other, we don't think it's a good option for them. And that's often related to academic performance. And it's not intended to be punitive. It's just partly because there aren't as many resources out there because the university resources are all located here. And we feel like it's important if a student is in academic jeopardy that they're close to home in that way. The smaller group in 2019, I don't know why that was trending that way. We're definitely trending back up. That we were trending down slightly in 2019. I think because we had this pilot of the spring semester during that same time. So some students who might have applied in fall applied in spring. But we're back up to 70, which is almost as high as it's ever been. Faye asked me if there have been any HKS/Wharton joint degree students who have done SSF. There has been one. And it was a unique situation because that student was doing their degree opposite of the normal HKS Wharton dual degree. If you don't know, we have a dual degree agreement with the Harvard Kennedy School where students can get an MBA and also an MPP at the Harvard Kennedy School. And generally what happens is you do your first year at Wharton and then you apply during your first year at Wharton. If you get in, you spend the fall of your second year at Harvard, right? And that's the same time that people are in San Francisco. So for most students, it does not work. We had one unique student who, for some reason, was slightly doing it in a different order. And he had been at Harvard Kennedy School first. But generally, there are no Harvard Kennedy School SSF joint students. It's one or the other. And then Isabel asked, assuming some students do summer internships in San Francisco before spending semester in San Francisco, do most students still feel like they're part of the Wharton/Philly community at the end of their MBA? Do they miss out on valuable experiences in Philly while they're in California? So I can't answer whether they miss out on valuable experiences in Philadelphia, but I don't think anyone can answer that, because you will gain valuable experiences in California, and you would gain valuable experiences in Philadelphia. So I really don't believe in like this binary of there's one decision and there's a right and a wrong. You will never know what the other option would have been, but I think what you're asking about is more like the FOMO side of things. And what I'll say is, and Christiana hit this too, I've never heard a student say they regretted going to San Francisco. I do think there's like a reintegration period where you're like, oh, like I'm seeing all these friends I haven't seen since last May. And so it does sometimes feel like it's been a while since you've been back to Philly, but people really get excited to come back for their final semester. And spring semester of second year is kind of when everyone does like the last this, the last that. And that's where a lot of those hallmark, like wrapping up Wharton experiences happen. And so in the fall, certainly it's nice to like reconnect with your friends in Philly, but I don't think that there are major things that students feel they miss out on. And for the most part, they feel like they met some of their best friends in San Francisco, and they get their Philly friends to come visit them and they go visit their Philly friends.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think something also that Christine, that you showed in one of your slides is some of those extracurricular activities that year over year SSFers do, which is like they do a a Napa trip, they'll do a Tahoe trip, a Hawaii trip. Like those seem to be like the regular, kind of ongoing social trips that they do every year, and usually you'll have Philly students join them for that too. So there is this sort of cross pollination of both coasts kind of coming together and such. So I completely agree with what Christy said. It's like it depends on your situation. I do think that if you're, maybe this is one question you're wondering is if you're part of clubs on the East Coast. Yes, most of the clubs will be, because that's where the majority of the students will be, but you can see like if you're a member of the tech club or if you're in a leadership role in the PEVC club, then it could actually parlay really well with the SSF program, because they also do treks. They do treks out to the West Coast. And so being sort of on the ground during the fall, you could, see I would argue that maybe that's a role that you can assume. You can be one of the trek coordinators/leaders for the West Coast, because those particular clubs do usually do West Coast treks. So yeah, that's another way to kind of like, if you're in sort of that circle, then I think SSF could make a lot of sense.
And the other thing I just thought of was like, there are a lot of students that do a semester or do a summer internship in San Francisco who go back to Philly. So there's like a huge Wharton community in San Francisco in the summer. So you get to see some friends, hopefully. I don't know. If you're in New York and you're doing banking, you probably don't see anyone. But if you're in San Francisco, I know I see a lot of alumni and they're able to leave work at a reasonable hour.
Yeah.
Gillen had a huge question that is really interesting. I don't think we can answer it. And they asked, with tech expanding outside of SF post-COVID, are there plans for a Wharton in Austin or Wharton in Miami? Additionally, are there international opportunities to learn about tech trends in other global innovation centers, e.g. Tel Aviv, Beijing? Thanks. I love this question. It is so above our pay grade to like ask if there would be expansion plans for other cities. I honestly think Wharton and Beijing would be like probably where they would move first. That's just me. That is not anything that the school has ever told me. But we have like the Penn Wharton Center in Beijing, and there's a huge alumni community in China and so much innovation and technology out there. So like if it were me and I were like looking in a crystal ball thinking about Wharton expansion, I would think they would go somewhere like that. But there are other international opportunities to learn about not just tech, but also a number of different topics around the world. These are things you would learn about when you come to Wharton. We have things called global modular courses, and they are short, modular, as the name would suggest, international courses where you would go study a specific topic in a part of the world and you'd be taught by a faculty member out there. So for example, there is a class on specifically like more in the healthcare space, but healthcare innovation in Israel in the past. There's been a class on innovation in Bangalore, I believe, in the past. There's also ones about supply chain in China, and there was one about supply chain in Mexico recently. So really fantastic international opportunities where you can earn credit and learn about different facets or global sides of industries that you're interested in around the world if you come to Wharton. Both of you go to SF, or if you just are staying in Philly for your entire 2 years. Any last questions? This has been great. You guys had so many questions. I love when there's
Really
lots of
good
questions.
questions.
Sometimes it's
Yeah.
like crickets and we're just sitting there.
I mean, there was a question from Vibhu about ways to connect with previous students or recent alum. And, you know, I would probably just say, unless you think differently, Christine, is that, you know, once you're like kind of committed to Wharton, then I think that will definitely be an option that will, you know, that we can make easily available. I think part of it is that we don't want to overextend our alum because, you know, alum also, you know, they give a lot of their time across, like, we ask them for panels, we ask them to do power dinners and all these things. And so we try to be really like respectful of like how many like outreaches that we do, you know, to our alum and keep that sort of like, you know, contained. Yeah, we don't want to burn them out, basically. Yeah.
And the other thing is that we have dedicated students called admissions fellows. And so when you're in the admissions process, at some point, you're going to come into contact with one of them, and they are fantastic, like sources of information and resources for you guys to connect with about so many things about Wharton. So I would like think about an admissions fellow as your first entree to the Wharton experience. And then on LinkedIn, if you connect with somebody and you see it, they don't always put it on LinkedIn, but there's some people who proudly wave their SSF banner on LinkedIn, which I love to see. So, you know, that's another avenue for you to pursue. That's more like a little more enterprising on your side.
Yeah, I forgot about the admission fellows. I think they're perfect because they can also address a lot of like maybe some of the basic questions, you know, and then once you get your basic questions down, then it's like you have really in-depth questions, and absolutely our alum and like past SSF, you know, current SSF students or alum would be a perfect, you know. And by the way, as I mentioned, that as we gear up for application season, which kicks off in December for the next SSF round, we do a panel with current students, and we'll do either with current students and or alum. So that's actually a great opportunity to meet them, you know. I mean, it's likely going to be Zoom because a lot of them are based here in the Bay Area or elsewhere around the world. So, you know, you'll get to see them online and then can connect directly to them. So there will be an opportunity for sure, Vibhu, for you to connect.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your time with us. We did the rare thing of running the entire time. So we'll let you go and have a good evening.